It was January 20th, 1982. The stage lights burned bright in Des Moines, Iowa. Dark toll. Thousands of screaming fans were packed into the Veterans Memorial Auditorium, ready for an unforgettable night with Ozzy Osbourne. He was already famous for his wild performances and unpredictable stunts, but no one knew they were about to witness one of the most talked about moments in rock history. The concert was in full swing. Ozzy, dressed in his usual dark and dramatic stage clothes, paced the stage like a predator. The crowd fed off his energy. He shouted, screamed, and waved his arms, commanding every pair of eyes in the arena. Then, suddenly, something strange flew through the air and landed right in front of him. At first, Ozzy thought it was a rubber toy, a fan's bizarre gift to their rock idol. But this was no toy. The small body lay still. The leathery wings were stiff. The head was tiny, with sharp little teeth. It was a bat. Ozzy bent down, picked it up, and without hesitation, brought it to his mouth. The audience roared, thinking it was all part of the act. But when his teeth sank in, he realized the awful truth. The bat wasn't made of plastic. It was real, and it was dead. A sickening taste filled his mouth. The crowd still cheered, not knowing what had actually happened. Some people laughed, others stared in disbelief. Cameras flashed. In those few seconds, Ozzy had done something that would follow him for the rest of his career. He spat it out, gagging, but the damage was done, not just to his stomach, but to his reputation, his health, and his legacy. No one could believe what they had seen. The moment passed quickly on stage. Ozzy kept performing, but his mind was racing. The show went on, but backstage, the consequences were already waiting for him. That night, a bizarre mix of rock and roll chaos, fan enthusiasm, and pure misunderstanding gave birth to one of music's most infamous legends. But the real story behind why Ozzy bit that bat, how it ended up on stage, and what happened afterward is even stranger than the myth. Before that shocking night, Ozzy's concerts had already built a reputation for being unpredictable. He loved theatrical stunts, throwing buckets of water, tossing meat into the crowd, and using rubber props to shock and amuse fans. Word spread quickly that Ozzy would do almost anything on stage. Fans loved it, and some wanted to be part of the madness. In Des Moines, one fan decided to take this to a whole new level. His name was Mark Neal, a teenager who kept unusual pets and had a taste for the weird. He owned a few bats and thought it would be a wild idea to bring one to the concert. Whether he planned to throw it on stage or just bring it along for fun, no one knows for sure. By the time the night came, the bat was no longer alive. Some say it had died naturally. Others believe the fan froze it to keep it preserved. Either way, Mark slipped it into his jacket and headed for the show. The concert was loud, hot, and electric. Fans pressed toward the stage, waving their arms and screaming. When the right moment came, Mark pulled the bat from his pocket and tossed it high into the air. It spun under the lights and landed right at Ozzy's feet. From where Ozzy stood, it looked like a fake stage prop, a rubber bat, like the ones he'd seen in horror movies. Without thinking, he picked it up. The audience leaned forward, eager to see what he'd do next. Ozzy had always been the type to shock people, and biting a fake bat would get a big reaction. The problem was, this bat wasn't fake. It was cold, stiff, and very real. But in the blur of the performance, Ozzy didn't notice until it was too late. When his teeth sank in, he felt the unmistakable crunch of bone and the soft, bitter taste of flesh. The crowd screamed, still convinced it was part of the show. But in that moment, Ozzy realized something was terribly wrong. The bat's body went limp in his hands. He spat it out in disgust, but the taste lingered. His eyes darted to his bandmates, who stared back in shock. Somewhere in the crowd, Mark Neal watched the chaos unfold, knowing he had just changed rock history forever. As the final notes of the concert faded, the cheers of the crowd still rang in Ozzy's ears. But backstage, the mood shifted fast. The crew gathered around him, eyes wide. "You know that bat was real, right?" one of them asked. Ozzy froze. The adrenaline of the performance drained away, replaced by a sinking feeling in his stomach. He thought back to the moment his teeth broke through the skin, the strange metallic tang on his tongue. It wasn't just gross, it could be dangerous. Someone called for medical help immediately. A local doctor arrived, already shaking his head in disbelief. "You bit a what?" he asked. Ozzy just nodded, still half in shock. The doctor didn't waste time. He told Ozzy that bats can carry rabies, a disease that can be fatal if untreated. Within hours, Ozzy was on his way to a hospital. The nurses seemed torn between laughter and horror. The treatment for a possible rabies infection wasn't simple. It meant a series of painful injections, starting that very night. Ozzy, who had faced screaming crowds, wild parties, and chaotic tours, now found himself lying in a sterile hospital room, waiting for a needle. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had lived through the excess of the rock and roll lifestyle, but it might be a bat that finally took him down. The shots hurt. They had to be given in the stomach back then, and each one felt like fire under the skin. Ozzy winced and cursed with every jab, but he took them all. His wife, Sharon, was furious, not just at the fan who threw the bat, but at Ozzy himself for not stopping to think. Meanwhile, news of the incident spread faster than any rumor. Radio DJs were already talking about it the next morning. Some people thought it was a publicity stunt. Others called it disgusting. But everyone was talking about it, and Ozzy's name was suddenly everywhere. The bite wasn't just a physical wound. It was the start of a story that would follow him forever. Even after the rabies shots were done, he couldn't escape the endless questions. Fans wanted to know if it was true. Reporters wanted every detail. For Ozzy, the night had started as just another gig, but now it had become a defining moment, one he could never take back. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Newspapers across the country printed headlines like "Ozzy Osbourne Bites Head-Off Bat on Stage." Radio stations replayed the tale again and again, adding their own dramatic twists. Some claimed the bat was alive and tried to fly away. Others swore Ozzy ripped it apart with his bare hands. The truth didn't seem to matter anymore. The more outrageous the version, the faster it spread. In the early 80s, there was no internet, no fact-checking at lightning speed. Stories were told over bar counters, in school hallways, and on late-night talk shows. Each retelling made Ozzy seem even wilder, even more untouchable. For his fans, the bat incident became proof that he wasn't just a rock singer. He was the Prince of Darkness for real. They started bringing strange gifts to shows. Rubber bats, fake skulls, and once, even a taxidermy squirrel. Ozzy had unintentionally set a new standard for shock rock, and people wanted to see just how far he would go next. But not everyone saw it as harmless fun. Animal rights groups were outraged. Parents, already suspicious of Ozzy's dark image, held him up as proof that heavy metal was corrupting youth. Religious groups pointed to the incident as evidence of satanic influence in rock music. The controversy only made the story grow bigger. Sharon, Ozzy's wife and manager, found herself fielding endless phone calls from reporters. She tried to set the record straight, explaining that the bat had been thrown by a fan, and that Ozzy thought it was fake. But once a story becomes legend, the facts stop mattering. Ozzy himself couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. In interviews, he played along with the myth, adding his own over-the-top comments. "I'll tell you one thing," he joked to one reporter. "It tasted terrible. It wasn't even cooked." His dark humor only fed the fascination. The incident became more than just a moment. It became a brand. T-shirts, posters, and even Halloween costumes celebrated the night Ozzy bit the bat. Whether people were horrified or thrilled, they couldn't stop talking about it. And as the years passed, the story didn't fade. It grew. But behind the myth, there was still the real man who had to live with it. Years passed, but no matter how many albums Ozzy released or tours he completed, the bat story was never far behind. At every press conference, in every interview, someone eventually asked, "So, about that bat?" Ozzy learned to take it in stride. Sometimes he told the straight truth. It was thrown by a fan. It was dead, and he thought it was fake. Other times, he leaned into the chaos, telling it like a campfire horror story, adding little twists to keep people entertained. He understood something most artists never do. Once you become part of pop culture legend, fighting it is useless. Better to make it your own. Still, the bite left its mark. He never forgot the sick feeling in his stomach that night, or the sting of those rabies shots. Whenever a bat showed up near him afterward, even a plastic one, he felt a twinge of memory. On stage, he sometimes joked about it, warning fans, "No more real animals, please." The music world never stopped referencing it. Other bands teased him. Comedians used it in routines, and horror movie fans embraced it like it was a rock and roll rite of passage. For younger fans who hadn't been alive in 1982, the story was like a wild fairy tale their older siblings swore was true. But there was also a strange kind of respect in it. The bat bite became a symbol of Ozzy's total commitment to his performance. So deep in the moment that he didn't hesitate, didn't stop to think, just acted. Even though it was a mistake, it showed the raw, unfiltered side of rock that people craved. Behind the scenes, Ozzy's family sometimes wished people would move on. Sharon especially got tired of it being the first thing interviewers mentioned. But over time, they realized the truth. The bat was never going away. It was part of the Ozzy story forever. Decades later, when Ozzy was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, fans still shouted, "Bite the bat!" from the crowd. He just smiled, shook his head, and gave a mock growl. The man had outlived the moment, but the moment had also made him immortal in a strange way. The bat bite wasn't just history. It had become his shadow, following him from stage to stage, year after year. In the years since that strange night in Iowa, Ozzy has been asked the same question more times than he can count. If you could go back, would you still bite the bat? He always laughs before answering, but the truth has shifted over time. In some interviews, he's blunt. "No way. It was disgusting. I wouldn't wish that taste on my worst enemy." In others, he grins and says, "Well, it worked, didn't it? People still talk about it." For Ozzy, the answer depends on whether he's speaking as the man who lived it, or the performer who understands what it did for his legend. He knows that moment will outlive him. Kids who weren't even born in the 80s still dress as bat-biting Ozzy for Halloween. Memes and jokes flood social media every time his name trends. The story has been told so many times, in so many ways, that even Ozzy admits he sometimes forgets the exact details. But what he remembers most isn't the taste or the headlines, it's the lesson. In his own way, he said it many times. Things happen in life that you can't plan, can't take back, and can't control once they're out in the world. All you can do is own them. The bat bite was one of those things. Over the years, Ozzy has turned the moment into a joke, a badge of honor, and even a business opportunity. On the 40th anniversary of the incident, he released plush toy bats with detachable heads that sold out almost instantly. Fans bought them not out of shock, but out of love for the man who could take a mistake and make it unforgettable. Looking back, Ozzy sees it as a perfect example of the unpredictable chaos of rock and roll. You walk on stage thinking you know what's going to happen, and then, bam, life throws you a curveball shaped like a bat. As for the fan who threw it, Mark Neal, he's told his own version over the years. But no matter how many people share their side, it's Ozzy's story the world remembers. And maybe that's the magic of it. A dead bat, a split-second decision, and a lifetime of legend. Love him or hate him, you can't deny one thing. On that cold night in 1982, Ozzy Osbourne didn't just perform a show, he made rock history.